What does it actually cost to live in Chicago in 2026 if you're planning to buy a home here? And I'm not talking about a number an online calculator spits out after you type in your salary and zip code, because Chicago can look surprisingly affordable, especially if you're coming from New York, California, Boston, or Washington, D.C. And in many ways it is, but there are a few expenses that can completely change your monthly budget if you don't understand them before you buy. So in this video, I'm breaking down the real cost of living in Chicago for a homeowner. What homes actually cost, what your monthly payment may look like, how property taxes work, how much cash you need at closing, and how much income you may realistically need to live here. And make sure you stay with me, because later in the video, I'm going to show you 2 ways Chicago homeowners can potentially lower their property taxes. One of them is incredibly simple, but a lot of buyers moving here have no idea it exists. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Dee Savage. I've lived in Chicago for 27 years, and I've spent more than 2 decades helping people buy and sell homes throughout the city. And one thing I've learned is that the cost of living in Chicago isn't always obvious. There are places where Chicago costs more than people expect, but there are also areas where your money goes much further than it would in many other major cities, especially when you look at the amount of space you can buy and the quality of the neighborhoods and the kind of lifestyle you can have here. So these are not numbers I pulled from some national website. This is what I see every day working with buyers in Chicago. Let's start with housing, because that is obviously going to be your biggest expense. You probably heard that a citywide median price is somewhere around $400,000. And technically that number can be useful, but it doesn't tell the full story for many of the neighborhoods relocation buyers are usually considering. If you're looking for a true 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo, and possibly a 3-bedroom condo in one of the more popular neighborhoods within a reasonable commute to downtown, a more realistic starting budget could be closer to $550,000. That can mean neighborhoods like Lakeview, Lincoln Park, Lincoln Square, Ravenswood, Andersonville, Logan Square, parts of Uptown, West Loop, or the near north side. The exact number will depend on the location, building type, condition, parking, outdoor space, and how competitive that particular part of the market is. But $550,000 is a much more realistic number for the type of a home that many of my relocation clients are picturing. And if you want a single family home in many of these same areas, you're usually starting around $1 million and going up from there. Now, if you're moving from Manhattan, San Francisco, LA, Boston, or Washington, D.C., these numbers can still feel very different from what you're used to. A 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo near the lake for around $550,000 costs less than a much smaller apartment in your current city. And a $1 million single-family home on a tree-lined street not far from downtown can offer a completely different amount of space and privacy than the same budget would buy you on the coast. That is one of the biggest reasons people consider this move. You're still spending a significant amount of money, but you're usually getting much more home and a very different quality of life for it. Now, Chicago is also a very neighborhood-specific market. Some homes sit, others receive multiple offers almost immediately. You cannot take one citywide statistic and assume that it applies equally to a condo in Streeterville, a house in Lincoln Square, and a vintage unit in Lakeview. The neighborhood matters, the type of property matters, the condition matters, and the price strategy matters. That is why I always tell buyers to look beyond the asking price and understand what is actually happening in that specific micro market. But regardless of what you buy, there's one expense you absolutely have to calculate correctly, and that is property taxes. Property taxes are probably the cost that surprises relocation buyers more than anything else. Chicago property taxes usually run somewhere around 1.75% to 2% of the property's value each year, although the exact bill can vary significantly. So let's use these same examples. On a $550,000 condo, you could be looking at approximately $10,000 to $11,000 per year in property taxes. That is roughly $850 to $900 per month added to your housing payment. On a $1 million single-family home, the annual tax bill could be closer to $18,000 or $19,000. That is more than $1,500 per month. And that is before the mortgage, insurance, utilities, or maintenance. This is where buyers get caught off guard. They look at a Chicago property and think this is way more affordable than what I could buy back home. And the purchase price may be, but once the property taxes are added, the monthly difference can become smaller than they expected. That doesn't mean that Chicago is not affordable. It just means that you need to price the taxes into the decision from the very beginning. Do not fall in love with a home based only on a mortgage estimate. Look at a complete monthly payment. And do not assume that every home at the same price range will have the same tax bill. Two similar properties can have surprisingly different taxes because of assessed values, exemptions, past appeals, and how the property is classified. Later in the video, I'm going to explain what you can do if the assessed value appears too high. But first, we need to look at the other side of the tax picture because this is where Chicago can work in your favor. Illinois has a flat state income tax rate of 4.95%. Chicago does not add a separate city income tax on top of that. That can make a meaningful difference if you're moving from a place that taxes income at both the state and city level. New York City residents, for example, pay city income tax in addition to New York State income tax. Other high-income households moving from coastal markets may also see a significant difference in what comes out of each paycheck. And this is something that people usually fail to connect. Yes, property taxes in Chicago are high, but depending on where you're moving from and what you earn, the income tax savings can offset part of that difference. You really have to look at a complete tax picture. Now, Chicago does have a high sales tax. The combined rate in the city is 10.25%, so the city gives you a little relief on what you earn and then finds other ways to collect when you spend it. That is Chicago. But for many professionals relocating from higher tax cities, the overall comparison can still work in their favor, especially when it's combined with a difference in housing costs. Now, let's talk about utilities. For a typical condo or a smaller home, you may want to budget somewhere around $180 to $300 per month for basic utilities. But this depends heavily on the building. In some Chicago condos, heat, water, gas, cable, or internet may be included in the monthly assessment. In others, almost everything is separate, so you cannot look at the assessment amount by itself. You have to look at what it actually includes. A $700 assessment that covers heat, water, cable, internet, building staff, and a major common maintenance may not be as expensive as it first appears. A $350 assessment that covers almost nothing may not look as inexpensive as it looks. That is one of the things that I help buyers break down when we are comparing condos. Now, winter is also going to affect your utility costs. Your January heating bill is not going to look like your July heating bill. And some of Chicago's beautiful older buildings can be less energy efficient than the newer construction. They can have character and beautiful details, but they can also have windows that remind you that it's 12 degrees outside. So when you're looking at a home, ask for recent utility bills. Do not base your budget only on an average number from a website. For internet and cable, you could be somewhere around $70 to $130 per month, unless it's included in your building assessment. Now, groceries in Chicago are not dramatically higher than the national average, and you have plenty of choices from budget grocery stores to specialty markets and neighborhood shops. And in the summer, Chicago has farmers markets throughout the city. They're not necessarily the cheapest way to buy groceries, but I love them, and I don't mind spending a little more once in a while. Where your food budget can really get away from you is dining out, because Chicago has an incredible restaurant scene. There's always a new restaurant to try, a neighborhood spots you somehow never noticed, or a patio that suddenly feels essential the minute the weather gets warm. That part of the budget is very personal. You can live here and cook at home most nights, or you can convince yourself that a Tuesday dinner in the neighborhood is a part of your cultural education. I'll let you decide which category you fall into. Transportation is one of the areas where Chicago can save you a considerable amount of money. In many neighborhoods, you generally don't need a car. If you live near the Red Line, Brown Line, Blue Line, or one of the major bus routes, and you work downtown or remotely, you could walk, take public transportation, and use rideshare only when needed. That can eliminate a car payment, gas, insurance, maintenance, city stickers, and parking. A monthly CTA pass is far less expensive than the complete monthly cost of owning a car. And for some relocation buyers, going car-free or reducing the household from 2 cars to 1 makes a bigger difference than almost any other change they make. But if you're keeping a car, budget honestly. Gas in Chicago can be expensive. Insurance varies widely based on the driver, vehicle, coverage, and zip code. And parking can be a major expense depending on where you live. Renting a garage space in a downtown or lakefront building can easily cost several $100s per month. Buying a parking space with a condo could cost anywhere from $20,000 to $70,000 or more, depending on the neighborhood and building. In some properties, parking is included in the price. In others, it's deeded and it's sold separately. And in some neighborhoods, street parking could be easier. In others, it can turn into a daily test of your patience and character. So if you own a car, parking should be a part of the neighborhood decision from the beginning, not something you figure out after you move. By the way, if you're relocating to Chicago and you're completely overwhelmed by all these numbers, that is completely normal. Most of my relocation clients feel exactly the same way in the beginning. One of the things I do for buyers is help them build a realistic monthly budget based on the neighborhoods and types of homes they're considering, because a $550,000 condo in Lincoln Park can carry very different monthly expenses than a similarly priced condo in Lakeview, the West Loop, or Streeterville. So if you're trying to figure out where your budget actually works, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to jump on a call, look at the numbers with you, and help you understand what is realistic before you start making decisions. My number is on the screen and in the description. Now, let's put all of this together. Let's start with a $550,000 condo. Assume you're putting 20% down. That is a $110,000 down payment and a $440,000 mortgage. Using an interest rate in the mid-60s, which is where interest rates currently are, your principal and interest payment could be somewhere around $2,800 per month. Then add property taxes, and let's estimate approximately $850 a month. Now add the condo assessment for a true 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. That could be anywhere from a few $100s a month to considerably more, depending on the building and what's included. Let's use a range of $300 to $700 a month. That brings your housing cost to roughly $4,000 to $4,500 per month before utilities, transportation, groceries, dining, and everything else. Once you add the rest of your lifestyle, a realistic all-in monthly budget could be closer to $5,500 to $7,000 a month. This is a wide range because your personal choices matter. A car-free household in a well-managed condo building will have a different budget from a household with 2 cars, higher assessments, and frequent dining out. But this gives you a much more realistic picture than simply looking at the monthly mortgage payment. Now let's look at a $1 million single-family home with a 20% down. That is a $200,000 down payment and an $800,000 mortgage. At a rate in the mid-60s, principal and interest are around $5,100 per month. Then add property taxes using our earlier estimate, and that could be more than $1,500 per month. There is no condo assessment, but now you're responsible for the entire property. The roof, the heating and cooling systems, the exterior, landscaping, snow removal, and every surprise that a house decides to introduce after you move in. So the housing cost alone may be somewhere around $6,500 to $7,000 per month. Once you add normal household expenses, higher utility bills, and plan appropriately for repairs and maintenance, a more comfortable monthly budget could be around $8,000 to $9,500. Again, the exact number will depend on the house, your down payment, your interest rate, taxes, vehicles, and how you live. But this is the kind of math you should be doing before you decide what you can comfortably afford. Now, let's talk about a number buyers sometimes forget: the amount of cash you need at closing, because your down payment is not the entire amount. Chicago buyers pay a portion of the city transfer tax at $7.50 for each $1,000 of purchase price. A buyer's portion on a $550,000 condo would be a little over $4,000. You will also have attorney fees. Illinois is an attorney closing state, so your attorney will review the contract, negotiate attorney review matters, coordinate with the other side, and represent you through closing. And then if you're getting a loan, you'll have lender fees, prepaid insurance, tax escrows, home inspection, and other closing charges. The exact number will depend on your loan and transaction, but as a general planning guideline, you should have additional liquid funds available beyond the down payment. Do not calculate your down payment to the last dollar and assume you're finished. This is how buyers end up feeling financially squeezed right before the closing. A strong Chicago lender should give you a detailed estimate early so you understand not only the monthly payment, but also the total cash required to close. So how much income do you realistically need? For the $550,000 condo, depending on your other debt and lifestyle, a household income somewhere around $160,000 to $180,000 can provide a comfortable range. For the $1 million single family home, you could be looking at $250,000 and more. But these are not loan approval numbers. A lender can approve one household for more and another household for less, depending on how much money you make, revolving debt, and credit score. And just because you qualify for a certain amount doesn't mean that you will enjoy making that payment every single month. That is why I prefer to start with what you're comfortable with, not just what you qualify for. What monthly payment allows you to live your life, save, travel, handle repairs, and still sleep at night? Then we work backward from there and make sure you're working with a lender who understands Chicago property taxes and condo assessments. Those expenses need to be included from the very beginning. Otherwise, the payment estimate is not very useful. Now, let's get back to the property taxes. There are two things that every Chicago homeowner needs to understand. The first is homeowners exemption. If the property is your primary residence, you qualify for the Cook County homeowners exemption. This doesn't automatically happen after your purchase. You have to apply for it. And depending on when you close, you may need to wait until the next filing period opens, which is usually around March. The exemption reduces the taxable assessed value of the property, which lowers your annual tax bill. The actual savings can vary, but it can amount to $500 to $700 per year. Now, this may not sound life-changing, but over 5 or 10 years, it adds up. This is one of those small details that it's easy to miss and forget when you're moving from another state and managing everything else that comes with relocation. And now the second option is appealing the assessed value. If the county's assessed value doesn't accurately reflect the property or comparable sales, you can file an appeal. Homeowners can file themselves. The process is available online, and you would support your appeal with comparable property sales and other relevant information. This is something that I can help you with by pulling appropriate comparable sales. You can also hire a property tax attorney to handle it. Most attorneys work on a contingency basis, meaning their fee is tied to the savings that they obtain for you. So if the appeal is unsuccessful, your cost is usually limited to a small filing fee, and if they do reduce the tax bill, they receive a percentage of the savings. That's usually about 30% of the savings. That can be a good option for people who are busy, do not want to manage the process themselves, or simply want someone experienced handling it. An appeal is never guaranteed, but if the assessed value appears high, it's definitely worth exploring. And this is one of the reasons I don't want buyers to see a tax bill and immediately assume that number can never change. We need to understand why taxes are what they are, what exemptions are applied, and whether the assessed value makes sense. One thing I don't think people appreciate until they move here is how much life happens outside of your home in Chicago. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's true. Summers here are incredible. Neighborhood festivals every weekend, the lakefront, walking to a dinner on a Tuesday night in your neighborhood. Those are the things that are really hard to put a dollar amount on when you're deciding whether Chicago is worth it. And that's why I don't think that Chicago cost of living conversation should be only about whether the mortgage is lower than it was in your previous city. It's also about what that money allows your life to look like. Can you live in a neighborhood where you walk to coffee in the morning? Can you reach the lakefront in a few minutes? Can you have another bedroom, outdoor space, or a home office without moving an hour outside of the city? Can you live in a real walkable tree-lined neighborhood, and still reach downtown easily. For many people coming from more expensive coastal cities, that is where Chicago starts to make sense. Not because it's inexpensive. Chicago is not cheap, but the value can be extremely compelling. You're living in a major global city with architecture, culture, restaurants, parks, beaches, and distinct neighborhoods. And for many buyers, home ownership is still attainable here in a way that it's not in some other major cities. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this. Do not move to Chicago just because you heard it's cheaper. Move here because it could offer a lifestyle that's difficult to recreate in New York, San Francisco, LA, Boston, or Washington, D.C. at a similar price point. More space can be a part of it, home ownership can be a part of it, but the affordability is only valuable when the neighborhood, commute, and daily life actually work for you. That is why the right budget and the right neighborhood have to be considered together. Now that you have a better idea what living in Chicago may actually cost, the next question is, where should you live? Because two people with the exactly same budget can end up living completely different lifestyles in Chicago depending on the neighborhood they choose. So before you start falling in love with listings, I want you to watch my video where I rank some of Chicago's most popular Northside neighborhoods and explain who they're actually best for. I break down what it's like to live there, how they compare, and which types of buyers tend to love each one. I will link it right here. And if you're moving to Chicago in the next 6 to 12 months, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week, I share honest information about Chicago neighborhoods, real estate, and what it's actually like to live here. And if you're trying to figure out your own budget, neighborhood, or timeline, you don't have to do it all by yourself. Feel free to reach out. We can talk through what you're looking for, what matters to you, and what your move could realistically look like. There's no pressure, just a straightforward conversation to help you make a smart decision. You can find my information in the description. I'm Dee Savic. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.